Welcome to Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. Welcome to episode 80. I am Martin.
I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis.
So this episode we are calling The New American Century. And what I want to explore, and the guys are letting me kick this one out for us, but I want to explore the emergence of America on the world stage in the second half of the 19th century, and as that then rolls over into the 20th century.
So the new American century we're talking about is not the 21st. It's the 20th.
Yes.
Because now we're 20 years into the...
People our age, the phrase turn of the century means two things. And depending on what century you're talking about.
Yes.
Not that we are that old. We didn't see the 19th into the 20th. It's
no.
Just...
So, but this is a topic that I've been reading about some and over the last few years. And in particular, there's two books about this that really have impressed me. The first one is John Taliaferro's All the Great Prizes, about the life of John Hay. John Hay is a big-time American statesman. And the second book is Robert W. Mary's President McKinley, Architect of the American Century. So you can see how those kind of play together. And, of course, I think all three of us have read Edmund Morris's Theodore Roosevelt trilogy.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of this as well.
Yeah. It's still the standard.
And then this also serves a bit as a...
Oh, yeah, this is kind of a coda to the Civil War series that we did this past summer. You know, those 4 episodes we talked about 1863. One of my complaints about biographies in general, but oftentimes history books, is you reach a certain level and you don't say what happened after. I was talking to the guys in the show prep that Peter Ackroyd did a wonderful, kind of the standard biography these days of Thomas More that I really loved, but it cringes because it really ends with his death. But he was such an enlightened and such a lightning rod of the time. The repercussions of that took place for years after. None of that was covered. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's a disservice.
Legacy is important.
Legacy is absolutely important. And the Civil War had such immense legacy. It deserves an episode for us to... And this kind of is that. It's not exclusively that. It pays it a little bit further forward than that. It's intended to bridge between the Civil War and World War I.
You know, I think you could make an excellent argument. You're talking about a code of Civil War legacy. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not just the, creating a way to systemically build racism into the South, which, granted, is a good deal of that. But one of the larger legacies, positive legacies, you could say, depending on your point of view, I guess, is without the Civil War, the rest of the century for America does not go the same way. Because everything that came out of the Civil War directly ties into building the U.S. into the power that it becomes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's the powder keg, the explosion, if you were, that provided the energy for where we ended up. And to be honest, it's not all bad. And I think that's kind of the premise that you're talking about here, right, Mark?
Because we tend to think of this era, and again, when you start thinking through the events, the death of Lincoln is a disaster for the country.
Right.
He's the guy that can stitch the country back together.
Oddly, it's a disaster for the South, too.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, the irony is not lost on history. That John Wilkes Booth, I mean, I forget who it was that said it, he has killed the South's only real hope.
Yeah. Because now the hard feelings, the punishment of the South is really going to be entrenched.
May have been Stanton. I may be wrong on that.
Yeah. And so, Andrew Johnson's basically a placeholder, a guy sitting in a chair. But
he's a lame duck for almost an entire term.
You are both so kind. I was wanting you all to just really lay some smack on the guy.
Well, his idea of Reconstruction is, okay, come on, you're back in. It's
politically that was never going to happen that way. Lincoln was the only one that had a shot at coming even close to that.
Right. Because Lincoln would have been willing to discuss and collaborate and bring Congress in, work with Grant, work with Sherman figure out a way to do a military occupation of the South that then begins to stitch the country together. And we've talked about Grant. We talked about, he's the guy that tries to suppress the Klan. He's the guy that's really trying to make sure that the verdict of the Civil War is not overturned in the South through domestic terrorism. And then, so what's going on then, what moves on is stitching the country back together becomes this engine of growth for the most part. The railroads, we show prepped about.
That takes place during this time.
Right, the railroads are the engine of growth.
Right.
And
without the railroads, you have two countries.
Oh, yeah.
You have the very populated, dense, for the time, East that is becoming very industrialized. And then you have the Great Plains and the West. And, you're talking about something that took weeks to months, depending on the time of year you went, to get from one side of the country to the other.
St. Louis to California is a 6-month journey by wagon.
Right.
So
yeah, it is not something, it is no small thing to say that the railroads are a game changer. They were a game changer in the East during the war, because it was the first time you really saw troops being moved like that.
Right.
Now you're moving not just people, you're moving goods back and forth.
Yeah. I mean, you're pumping blood to the West through the railroads.
Because
it's your artery system.
Yeah, because a lot of that, there's not a whole lot that you can do. You can grow food in the middle, in the plains. Then once you get past the mountains, which are nearly impassable,
right,
then you've got the fertile land of California and so on. But without a way to connect those, it really is different.
Then you would have had a different regional tendencies.
Yeah. Yes.
To each other, or tensions actually.
Yeah, the railroads are the growth. They're the blood pumping through the continent. But when we look at this era, our thoughts of this era are colored by, we love Western movies, so it's all about the Old West. It's all about gunfights and all that stuff. And we talked a little bit about this in show prep. A lot of that stuff is aftermath of the Civil War.
Yeah,
it's PTSD.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, it's almost exclusively that, because you've got how many hundreds of thousands of men under arms taught to do something that humans are capable of, but were not created for. This terrible, horrible, horrific violence against each other. And then when you're finished, you don't need them anymore. You toss them. Okay, we'll go home. Well, that doesn't always work. Sometimes home's not there in many respects.
Disease swept through many of the major cities, north and south.
That's correct.
Whole families are gone. Veterans go home to nothing.
Right. And so many of these people, they have nothing to do, so the West became a convenient dumping ground for them to head west. Doc Holliday's a great example from Georgia, who actually gets in trouble and ends up having to go west. Of course, he had tuberculosis and other things like that, too. Tons of these things happen. In fact, the gunfight at the OK Corral, which is kind of like those watershed moments in the Old West. If you want to talk about an exemplar, that's the moment.
Yeah.
It's the Union North in the people of the Earps versus the Southern South in the people of the Clantons and the Cowboys. And they clashed spectacularly.
That doesn't come out in really any of the films, but the story of Tombstone is a story of Union versus Confederate political power grasping to control
all over
Arizona.
again in a wilderness that is where it's up for grabs.
Power is up for grabs because the Earps are from Iowa. They're Union veterans.
Yeah.
The Clantons are from Texas.
And the violence that
Confederate
erupts
veterans.
thereof is basically a continuation of the violence that was done during the Civil War.
Yeah.
James Earp and Virgil Earp were Union veterans. They saw combat.
Right. And I want to talk about this a little bit because I think context is really important. You guys know me. I'm big on context.
Do it.
So when we think about setting the stage for this transformation of the U.S., we talked about how the Westerns, what we think of the Westerns as the outgrowth of the Civil War. One of the things that I think is important to remember is that the Civil War at the time would probably have been the biggest war ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Most number of men under arms, with possible exception of the Napoleonic Wars.
They would have had more, but they also had a much larger area to pull from. Well, I don't want to say much larger, but
maybe not geographically, but
when you start adding Russia in, that's kind of where the numbers get
my point is, population-wise, it would have been, but it also was basically a push from one country across the entire continent.
Right.
It wasn't limited to one geographic country like
right,
this
because that was a war of conquest,
right?
Which is a different thing entirely.
From the South, so was the Civil War, but that's an entirely different thing.
That's right, yeah.
But my point is, though, this is the first time you saw such a massive number of men under arms in the same country that after the war was over, they're still in the same country.
Yeah, the invaders don't go home because everybody's the invaders.
Right. When will they get it through their heads? That's all our territory, all our land.
Lincoln, yeah.
Whereas, prior to this, I'm willing to bet that a good number of the men who went east with Napoleon, if they lived, never made it back because they just stayed where they were.
Oh yeah, there was a bleeding of people that across Europe during that time. The only part of the issue was too is they spoke different languages.
Yes,
that kind of messed with it a little bit.
It does, but you also have to remember though, even then, it was not unusual for people to speak more than one language.
That is correct. Well, von Clausewitz was a great example because he went to Russia.
Because even the lower class, they would have been able to get by even in some pidgin version of
right.
German or Italian or Spanish, whatever.
Well, and Jewish diaspora, they're all. I mean,
yeah.
They're all across the continent as well.
So, you spread out the aftermath. Whereas here, in the same country, you've got to figure out how to deal with all these people in a different way than I think has ever been done before. So, yeah, when you're talking about sending all those guys west, while not necessarily, this is our official policy.
Yeah.
It kind of becomes the unofficial.
Yeah. It kind of happens.
And it's not necessarily sending them, as you've got all these guys that they've lost, as well as the ones in the north that don't know what to do with themselves. And they're looking for meaning. They're looking for a way to have some control over their lives, which they can't do where they're from. So they go out west trying to restart their lives.
It was an opportunity that was, lots of people took advantage of.
Right. Yeah. This is something that's unheard of.
Right. And the government set the conditions.
Yeah.
Because selling off the land at really, really cheap prices and
the Homestead Act.
Right.
That's a big one right there.
So you're right. We tend to look at this era through this one prism, and of course, in our modern day, that prism gets colored by revisionist history, and everything's evil, and America's always bad.
Well, the Indian Wars brought that about.
Yeah.
There's nothing good about that.
Well, you have that, but you also had what went on in the South too. There's a lot of evil going on.
Yeah,
absolutely.
There is a definite attempt to overturn the verdict through domestic terrorism. No question.
And if Lincoln had lived, I think things would have gone a lot differently in that respect. Because once Reconstruction's over, because the North, they finally just get tired of it.
Yeah,
it's like we're done. Well, the Klan and those people step into that power vacuum.
They reemerge.
Even
after.
If Lincoln is there and things aren't as bad, and that domestic terrorism maybe it's still there, but maybe it's not as bad. What does the South look like if that power vacuum isn't filled by them?
Johnson for sure is got his eyes closed. He doesn't.
Yeah, the damage he does early on, even though it's not. Because think about it, he's got 3 years.
It's a damage of inaction.
Well, that's correct. Yeah.
It's
in that 3 years, a lot of that is spent in trying to figure out what we're going to do.
Yeah.
You're getting all of the amendments passed because those don't happen all at the same time.
Right.
And you're figuring out what you're going to do with everybody and how you're going to do it. So, that's not an immediate. We know exactly what we're doing. So.
Yeah,
he gets a short shrift in a lot of ways, and I don't say that just because he's a Johnson, because I'm not related. But he gets short shrift in a lot of ways because he was given an unwinnable hand.
Oh, there's no question, yeah. And there's no redeals here.
Yeah, no redeals.
Well, and he wasn't up to the challenge.
He was not.
He was not up to the challenge.
Well, he was really never intended to be anything. He was an attempt at a conciliation.
You didn't pick vice presidents back then as potential successors.
Well, that's right. In which he's one of the primary examples. We were talking in the show prep.
He's a unionist from Tennessee,
right? Which was an attempt to sew things together, which didn't ultimately didn't work. Yeah.
But so that's this prism that we see this era through. But there's more to it than that, and that's what I've discovered in reading these two particular books. Is there's a real development of American power that Europe pays attention to.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Well, it's not just military power. It's economic power.
It's economic power.
Because industrialization is going on.
Which gives us weight on the international stage. And contrary, I think, to this idea that everything's horrible, we do attempt to use this influence and this power in a positive way. And John Hay is, I think, a guy that there ought to be a statue to. Now, of course, in the last few months, probably somebody would have tried to tear his statue down.
He was a unionist.
Yeah. But that doesn't seem to matter anymore.
Well, unfortunately, right.
So, just a little on Hay that makes him so interesting. He's a very young man during the Civil War. He ends up in D.C. Back then, you didn't really have a White House staff, so to speak, or a presidential staff, but he's answering Lincoln's mail.
Yeah.
He and a man named John Nicolay, they get a job.
Personal secretaries.
To Lincoln. They're answering his mail, and Lincoln gets a massive volume of mail, obviously. He's in the middle of a war, so he's getting letters about how to conduct the war and what to do. And
probably letters from moms and wives saying,
what
have you done to my husband and children, whatever.
Yeah, so it's a huge job that he and Nicolay are performing. And so, of course, he's around when Lincoln is killed. He's about to leave the administration. Mary Todd couldn't stand either one of them. Wanted them pushed out. Because you're paying these guys out of your own pocket. There's no budget for this. So
right.
Lincoln's really paying them. And Mary Todd Lincoln wants to use that money for new drapes or something.
Well, yeah.
Lord. Unfortunately, she's... By the time, I think it's Tad, right?
Yeah.
That dies as a young boy.
No, it's Willie. Willie is the one that really messes her up bad. Lincoln had 4 sons. Robert's the only one that lived to full adulthood,
right?
And he actually becomes part of the administrations of what some of the stuff we're going to be talking about. But the second son, Edward Eddie, he dies as a child, as a little more than an infant. I think he's 3. Yeah. Willie and Tad were the next 2, and they were close to each other in age, and they were children during the years of the White House, and they were known as just fireballs all over the place. And Willie was the leader of that. And Willie contracted scarlet fever in 1863 and dies in the White House. And Mary Todd, who was never the most stable individual anyway, there are stories of her chasing Abe down the Springfield, Illinois streets with rolling pins, where he has to stop her and tell her, "No, Mary, let's go back to the house." I mean, these are documented issues. Yeah. So she's
a rat in a coffee can.
That's very well put. I was hoping one of you guys would pick this up and give me the colorful metaphor that we were looking for. Yes, she is. But Willie's death absolutely destroyed her. And the movie Lincoln, which we talk about often because it is so good, Steven Spielberg's, portrays this pretty well. Lincoln had to not only manage the greatest war on American soil ever, but also manage this batshit crazy wife of his, who has, just by her position, certain degrees of power.
Yeah,
and being able to push out Hay and Nicolay was part of that, because it was domestic type stuff. It was functioning in the house. She had authorities in that.
Yeah.
And Lincoln's death, which also unhinged her even more. She never got over that. Yeah. In fact, Robert had to have her committed at one point, which still there's controversy over that.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But Hay and Nicolay eventually would produce the first important Lincoln biography with Robert's blessing.
Right.
And really, their biography colors our understanding of Lincoln to this day.
Oh yeah, almost everybody, because it's primary data, because they're there.
They lived it.
They lived it the whole time. Yeah. So they're kind of the standard of the presidential biographies. In fact, there weren't really presidential biographies before Lincoln. Before that,
but Hay then goes on to marry wealthy, but he's a poet. He's a novelist. His novel is called The Breadwinners. It's pretty unique. It's written about labor-capital relations, and
So is this like a 19th century Ayn Rand?
It's probably close. Probably close. But he comes down on the side of capital, of course.
Well, that was in the ascendancy at this time,
Yeah,
which is
but
yet another part of this whole thing going on. I mean,
Yeah.
we remember, J.P. Morgan and all that in the early 1900s, but that power didn't start overnight. It's built through the 1880s and 90s, and Hay was part of that tension going on.
Yes.
Capital versus labor.
Well, and not only he's part of the tension inside the Republican Party as well, because he's a reformer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
he grew up under that.
Yeah. So he's kind of in and out of influence.
Well, yeah. Lincoln's reformist tendencies, no doubt, formed him.
Oh, yeah. Lincoln nearly adopted the two of them to a point. I mean, they're of that age where they would have seen Lincoln as a father figure.
Right. So
and as a reformer.
Yeah. Well, and
at the end, yeah.
Well, and that's the interesting thing. They're going to be heavily influenced by him. And we have to remember the Republican Party was founded as the Reform Party.
Yes.
Correct.
Absolutely 100%.
Yes.
And it was kind of...
they're at the origins. And so that's going to color everything that comes after them. Right. But unlike most Reform parties, it immediately gains almost total control of the country.
Yeah.
Because of the Civil War.
And then the Grant faction comes to be known as the Stalwarts.
Right. So there's that usual tension you have in different parties is now happening in the one party.
Yeah. So they've got, I mean, every party goes through this, and it's different. I mean, right now you've got, even the Democratic Party is kind of the progressive AOC group, and then, a more moderate
Joe
Biden sliver or whatever. So, and that was going on then.
It's a natural tendency.
So he's in and out of influence with the Republican Party throughout this period. But he becomes an advisor to Garfield just as Garfield is killed. So now he's experienced almost in personal contact 2 assassinations. He comes back into government. He eventually becomes ambassador to the Court of St. James, I think it is. Then becomes Secretary of State. This is under McKinley. And he's an important government official when McKinley is killed.
To lose 2 presidents by assassination might seem to misfortune.
1 is bad luck. 2 is...
Carelessness.
3 is just outright
it's like,
suspicious.
Maybe it's me.
Enemy action. That's the way, yeah.
But been married 9 times? Hell, maybe it's you.
We've never actually, I don't think, said this on air, but Tim Wilson, the great comedian, long may he rest in peace, is one of our heroes.
Yeah, he's a funny guy. We've
funny
seen
man.
him in person.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's one of his gags.
Look him up. He's worth some time. He was with Capitol Records longer than the Beatles were, as he was famed for saying. Which that's what he said when we saw him together that one time.
So Hay's career goes all the way through to Theodore Roosevelt. So this is a guy that's really, what would you call it, at the crossroads of history.
He really is.
Yeah, he was actually portrayed on film. We talked about this in show prep by John Huston, the great director. In the movie,
I missed that.
The Wind and the Lion with Sean Connery and Brian Keith, directed by one of our heroes, John Milius.
Yeah,
wow, that's some big names.
The famous cable. We want Perdicaris alive or Rasuli dead.
Yeah.
That was read out in the 1904 Republican Convention, the coronation of Roosevelt, running for that term after McKinley's killed. That's attributed to Hay. Yeah. So this idea of we're tired of the crap. We want Perdicaris alive or Rasuli dead. And Perdicaris was an American kidnapped in Morocco.
Yeah, which, watch the movie. It is, it's a work of art. I mean, it was Milius, for gosh sakes, but you had some annoying, for gosh sakes. It's one of Sean Connery's greatest movies. We got an episode coming up out of him, though, so we'll go more into that there.
But Hay is a guy that, again, today they'd be wanting to pull his statue down, but he really tried to not just develop American power, but then to use it in a positive way. He's the author of what was called the open door policy.
Yeah, I think this is the best example of trying to use newfound American might in a positive way.
Yeah, you may have just kind of stated the entire premise of this episode. That's really what we're talking about here. And Hay was the author of that.
Yeah.
Or certainly one of the driving forces.
Yeah, as Hay is McKinley's Secretary of State. And again, McKinley is one of these guys, too, that gets kind of this... Well, he was an affable dude that, really...
They got shot.
Yeah, they got shot.
Yeah.
Mark Hanna was the power behind the throne. He was the campaign manager from Ohio. He was an affable Ohio guy. But really, Robert W. Mary makes a case that McKinley knows what he's doing.
Yeah, Roosevelt's shadow reaches backwards and overshadows him too
McKinley too much.
And that's not fair to McKinley.
The energy that and this vibrancy and the great quotes and all that Roosevelt was really overshadows kind of this mild-mannered McKinley. But McKinley knew what was up. He knew what the score was.
He was a huge political animal. He was very, very well-known and well-respected on both sides of the aisle, which is unusual in this time.
And very influential in Congress.
Yes.
He had been a congressman and still had friends, even in the House, not just the Senate, but in the House. And so he knew how to kind of put people together to get things done. And again, he's bringing in Hay. Hay is not a stalwart. He's not one of these old school guys with the spoil system. He is a reformer. And in the aftermath of the Spanish-American War, very important.
Which is huge, yeah.
Right. You know, we're now in possession of the Philippines. We're now in possession of Cuba. And there's a tension going on in America about we shouldn't be holding on to these places. We are not imperialists like the bad old Europeans. So there's this tension in trying to figure out, well, what are we really? And Hay is one of these guys that's, we're going to use American power for good. We're going to try to fix Cuba. We're going to try to fix the Philippines and eventually give them independence. We're not going to hold them forever. Maybe a little optimistic, but I think that was what he was wanting to do. That was his intention.
In many respects, he is the great-grandfather of what would eventually become the Marshall Plan. Because that philosophy becomes so entrenched in American understanding, by the time of the Marshall Plan, we don't think anything else of it. Of course, we've seen the disaster that came out of World War I.
Well, in many ways, part of that. In many ways, though, that is, even though some might call that an anti-imperialist attitude, it's a very imperialist attitude. Because what you're doing is really, this is not my argument, but I can see how someone would make the case that this is a continuation of American policy from the very beginning, in that Europeans came over here and colonized a place that already had people living in it, under the pretense of we're better than they are, and we can teach them how to be like us, and therefore better.
The white savior complex.
The white man's burden.
White man's burden. And so then we started doing this in the Philippines and Cuba. And you see this later on in the early 20th century in the Dominican Republic and other places where we do this.
Nicaragua, Haiti, and
down to Panama when they start building the canal, all of this. And it's going to have its pros and cons. It's going to have, yes, some good things happen, and yes, bad things happened. But I think you have to recognize, though, it's a different form of imperialism.
Oh, yeah. It's very different than European, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it is different than European imperialism because it is not about conquering to strip the country that you're conquering of its wealth.
That's naked greed.
Right. I will say this, generally speaking, that was not how we went about things. We didn't go over and granted, it's not like we went someplace that had, large copper mines and gold mines and diamonds like in, that you would see in Africa. But overall, I'd have to say, for all the warts, it had a more beneficial effect than the colonialism that went on in Africa.
It's a tightrope.
Yeah,
they're walking a tightrope.
They are
trying to figure out what to do because you've defeated Spain. Spain had these places. Now what do you do? They're not ready to be.
But it was not a war, and the Spanish-American War was not a war of conquest or imperial attitudes. It just kind of happened.
Well, it kind of happened, but it kind of happened on purpose.
Well, there's
it was the idea to drive the old world out of this hemisphere, especially in Cuba.
Well, and that's a Monroe thing.
Exactly.
Where we've got the history of that, how that goes with it.
Right. Well, it's also, though, you've got people in the country, the yellow journalists, not the least of them, because they help drive the influence. We're an economic power. We have built a military. We built the Navy. And once you build that, what are you going to do with it?
Right. And once you've won the war, what do you do with what you've taken away from Spain,
Right.
the Philippines,
Now,
and
granted,
Cuba? You got to figure it out.
They talk about this being the emergence of the U.S. as a world power, sort of. But it's kind of like when a Big Ten team plays somebody from the what was the old conference that was all the cities. Louisville, U of L,
Metro,
the Metro Conference,
USA.
No, probably even before that, because
Metro's the 70s.
When you when a 4A team goes and plays a single A team, it's not the same. That's what the Spanish American War was.
Yeah,
they were on their last legs as a power, and we saw it. Well, we as in those who were looking to flex power saw that as an easy win.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And let's face it: if you want to go to war, you don't want to go to war against the heavyweights. You want to go against the lightweights.
Well, and you also get noticed by the heavyweights too, which was part of the thing. And bearing in mind, this was capitalized upon. This could have been a flash in the pan. Roosevelt, in particular, the Great White Fleet and all that.
Yeah.
He capitalizes on this and brings that victory and takes it where it could go.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, part of what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
because let's take a break real quick though, because I want to tag on to both of those things. I want to tag on to Monroe, like you guys were talking about, and I want to get back to the open door policy too in China and how important that was. But first, new bourbon.
Yes, you poured this, and neither of us have a clue what it is. I haven't even tasted mine yet.
You haven't tasted? Well, we're taking a break.
I took a sip earlier. It's interesting.
It's Quarter Horse Reserve.
I saw that over there on the counter. Okay.
It's brand new. Just opened today for this recording. Listeners, we are back at Studio M here in the spacious recording facilities.
Yeah.
And I broke open a new bottle of
Basement
bourbon.
of the Nakatomi Tower?
Yes. The 30th floor of Nakatomi.
31st, right.
30th floor behind the waterfall, just down from Ellis's office.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to get this right. Okay, yeah, exactly. And you've given us soapstone cubes in our glasses here that we're you hear the clink as we go through here. So it's chilled, but not watered. So it's could you call this quasi-neat? Is that even possible?
It's basically neat. It's just chilled.
Yeah,
but it's Quarter Horse Reserve is from Owensboro.
Oh,
Owensboro. A little different. I usually prefer my Nelson County stuff, but...
Yeah.
Well, when we went to Minard, we ate there in Owensboro at Old Hickory Barbecue, which you guys weren't as huge of fans of as I was. Personally, I thought it was absolutely fantastic.
Well, I enjoyed it immensely.
Owensboro Barbecue.
And we had been there before
when
we went to the ordination of...
Bishop Medley.
Bishop Medley.
That's right, yeah. And it was... Owensboro Barbecue is very different than any other barbecue around. Proudly so. The mutton... I'm going off on a tangent, but we kind of...
But it's barbecue. Come on.
Barbecue.
It's barbecue and bourbon.
It's all right. We haven't talked a lot of barbecue, and I think we probably got a Hoopajube episode at some point that we're going to do that.
Yes, we'll have to do that.
We did a chili one. It's time to do a barbecue one. So we're just kind of chop that up.
I do prefer the meat naked and allowed to be sauced myself.
Yeah, to extent, yeah.
Smoked
I
meat,
agree.
though. I love smoked meat.
Owensboro Barbecue don't work that way. It's all mixed together.
It's pre-sauced.
That's
I'm
very
okay with
different.
that. I'm not real big on just slathering it so that, it drips off. Because to me, it's the meat.
You want to taste the smoke.
Yeah.
That's right. Oh,
You want to taste the rub.
Yeah. I want the
like the
flavor,
rubs,
but I don't want to be overwhelmed because for me, it's all about being a carnivore.
Well, that's right. Well, we the lunch that we had today as we were recording, we got from Bootleg Barbecue just up the road here, which is like we were talking about it. It's the closest restaurant to the Nakatomi Plaza. So it's just literally moments that we could have walked if we really felt like it. And dang, it was good.
We'll have some of the bourbon.
Well, I have. I've been clinking around here. I have some.
It's the kind of the strong caramel.
Whoa! Yes, it's got that. Yeah.
Yes, there's a very subtle hint that reminded me of the maple bourbon from a while back.
Yeah.
Very subtle.
Very subtle because it's not near as sweet as that.
Yeah, no. But
it's not.
It brought that up to me, and it's got a. Its burn is a little more nasally.
It is.
Yeah,
I noticed that too.
It's up in here. Yeah.
Which is an inch. I'm more a fan of the throat
the burn, the throat burn versus the nose burn.
Yeah. But I like this though. It's a good flavor.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have anything that marks it taste-wise as anything different than what we would have gotten from out in Nelson County, Marion County, places like that.
Yeah,
It feels texture-wise a little thicker.
Yeah,
than
The
some of the
chew,
bourbons
the
we've
chew
had.
is a little.
You're right.
Yeah.
I hadn't
You know,
picked that up, but
consistency.
you're
It's,
right.
it's
Yeah.
it's interesting because most of the others are a thinner liquid.
Yeah,
that we
this
tend to have.
has got a heft to it.
Yeah,
A
It's
heftier
little-
chew, a little
yeah.
stronger flavor, a little more woodsy.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a little bit more,
Aftertaste too.
a little more oaky, woodsy flavor.
Oaky is good. Yeah.
Less sweetness, less caramel to me.
yeah.
Less
I mean, to
caramel.
me, it was just a hint at the very
Yeah.
beginning of the taste.
Yeah,
But this is not what you would consider an antiseptic, though. We've talked about that. That's one of your big issues when it's
right.
When
If it
there's-
tastes like medicine, I don't
that's
care for
yeah,
it.
that's exactly,
Right.
and that's this
Well,
doesn't
so
have
many
that, but
whiskeys, which to us are just a poor man's cousin,
Bourbon.
poor cousin to bourbon. They can only aspire to be as good as bourbon.
agreed.
Are like that they're antiseptic. You know, they're all about that harshness.
A little bit of chocolate, a little bit of dark
Yes,
chocolate.
yes.
A little bit of dark
Really?
chocolate.
That's a
Does
good
it
way to
have
put
it, or
it.
you're just thinking it?
No, that's it's finally
That's what
clicking.
you're.
Yeah, that's a good way to
some,
put it. Yeah,
After some sniffs and some chew, there's a little bit of dark chocolate and a little bit of wood.
I would never have
And
pulled that
not-
out, but you're right.
Not a lot of sweet.
yeah.
No,
yeah.
definitely not
So
that.
strong
The,
flavor.
It's an
if you
adult
like-
taste.
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Different. It's definitely different from the ones we have usually talked about. You said the burn starts out in the upper part of the palate,
Ooh, yeah.
but it moves. It moves its way down very slowly.
It's a nice,
which is
warm,
interesting,
Right
yeah.
in there, right in the diaphragm.
So
Yeah, and the diaphragm's not bad. The esophagus, not so much in the stomach.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, some are the opposite.
Well,
some,
we just
some,
had a big meal, so it's hard to say whether or not
I suppose that's right.
that's interfering.
It's landing on some ribs and hot wings.
That's right.
So
What the wings were hot. They
Sticky.
were sticky
Sticky.
wings. That's right.
Sticky.
Yeah, they were very, very good.
Very good. Yes.
So yeah, Quarter Horse Reserve. I think our verdict is
Oh yeah.
it's good, but be ready for it to be a little bit stouter flavor than
Yeah.
some others.
Stout.
I can
That's a
see
good
putting
word.
this in the rotation every once in a while.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it was only $25-26
That's not bad.
down the street here.
You know, that's maybe it's just because we live here. I don't know if bourbons are priced higher the farther away you get from Kentucky or not. I
Hey,
just
listeners,
don't know.
let us know.
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah.
You know, shoot us an email. Go to our website, snakesandotters.com. You can find links to our profiles.
Our new website, yes.
Yes.
It's only recently come about. Thank you, Robert, for doing most of the engineering on that.
We've all had our hands in it.
That's right. Well, when it comes to content, we've actually kind of got it figured out now. Where this is where you're going to get bonus information if we want to go deeper on some of the stuffs we like or the subjects that we've talked about, captains in particular.
or some hints to go back and find some old episodes.
Well,
Yeah.
that's exactly true. We're kind of getting it down where it's going to be a Martin Mondays
Wabbit Wednesday.
and Francis Fridays, where we each of us for sure we're going to do that.
Yeah.
Although we can and all do put our own stuff down whenever
Right.
whenever the spirit moves us.
Yeah, but you can find us a way to email us there at the website.
Yeah, we each have our own emails. It's at that domain, snakesandotters.com.
So, let us know if it's priced any differently elsewhere. But I've really been pleased because over the last year or so, we have found several good bottles in that $20 to $30 range.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
that's
Normally,
you've
that
been
is
really
seen as a low-end mixing bourbon range.
good. Interesting you say that
But
because
to me, the ones we have found that we've liked are not mixing bourbons.
I tell you what, you can spend $50 if you want, but Knob Creek, Elijah Craig, Four Roses, Quarter Horse Reserve, all in that 25 plus to 30 range, you are not going to go wrong.
Yeah,
You're not going to go wrong.
yeah, you will not have a bad bourbon. out of any
interesting
of
that
those.
you say that the price is so good because when we first started buying bourbon, you remember the first time we bought Basil Hayden, the first time you ever tried it. This was in the early 90s. It was $30 a bottle then, and we thought it was absolutely outrageously overpriced.
Well, we also tended to mix our bourbons. Back then.
Yeah, and also we was poorer.
We were
those
poorer,
days.
and we were more. We were still learning our way around a good bottle of bourbon.
Yeah.
And we still, there's always more to learn.
Well, that's
but we are
right.
far better at it than we used
Well,
to.
that's kind of goes with the whole concept of age and things like that. In fact, we're going to do one of our next Hoopa Tubes is going to be about Generation X and why we're so awesome. So, I guarantee you, this is going to be one of those moments that would fit into that well.
And I neglected to mention also Bullet and Old Tub
That's right.
that we've liked are also in that price range. In fact, Old
That's right.
Tub is under that price range. Old
It
Tub
is.
is $21, $22.
Right.
Yeah, and it's
Well,
it's
and that
excellent.
Four Roses you mentioned is often on sale, $20.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, for $20, I don't think you'll find a better bourbon.
No.
I
It
agree.
is smooth. It's great. It's one, and that's just your basic Four Roses. The small batch and stuff is not even that much more expensive when you get into those. So it's great stuff. And no, we're not alcoholics.
No.
Sounds like it, but we're not.
No.
We
Just
we appreciate something, and we in particular, and Robert and I in particular, that dog don't hunt. We've talked about that
Yes.
before.
Yes.
That in many respects, some of the reason we like bourbon is to tell ourselves and the world around us that no, we're not, and we're not even close.
Well, for us, we truly are social drinkers.
Absolutely. Because to be honest,
I mean, I'll have a beer every once in a while at night, but one.
Yeah.
One only.
One-
One beer only,
and usually
Vasily.
with a meal.
That's right.
Yeah, if I'm having them.
Not me. I like mine as a after dinner,
After-dinner,
relaxing kind of thing.
after mowing the grass is not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
if
a
you've done
good time
something,
to have one.
something to clear the palate and all that stuff. But as a general, the only time I ever drink anything is with you guys here. That's basically it.
I just never had the taste for it
Never had the
growing up, and
No.
because as we both know, coming from families that had to deal with alcoholism,
That's right.
it's not a road you want to go down if you have a choice.
That's right.
So
Absolutely, it's not. So we don't ever want that to be a thought in how we go about things like this, because we drink responsibly.
oh,
In
absolutely.
fact, we are probably the poster boys of drinking responsibly.
So I want to tag right on because somebody brought up Monroe. And
Yes,
Monroe-
that was Francis.
The Monroe Doctrine, and absolutely what John Hay did, and pushing Spain out of this hemisphere, and what Roosevelt ends up doing, interceding with Venezuela and Germany, and their dispute, and all of that is definitely the continuation of the Monroe Doctrine. So you're
Panama
absolutely-
Canal too, because
and the Panama Canal.
because didn't it have European origins before we took into it?
Well, there was the
French
attempt
attempt,
at Culebra in Nicaragua.
Yeah.
yeah, that's it. See, I knew.
Well, the French had the rights, but their attempts collapsed, and we bought their
bought the
rights for
yeah.
next to nothing. But yeah, Hay ends up negotiating several treaties for Roosevelt to get the canal going. So he's very influential there. But the other piece, and this to me is the key to understanding what I'm trying to get to, is the open door policy.
Yes, please.
So, at the turn of the century, China is a mess. And the European powers are very close to essentially carving it up like Africa. I mean, we were within a whisker of,
European
British China,
invading.
British China and German China and Italian China and
To go along with French Indochina and all that kind
right.
of stuff.
I mean, it's very much where it could have been carved up the same way as Africa, German East Africa and British Cameroon and all that kind of stuff. And China could have emerged as a dozen separate countries easily. But Hay intervenes. And it's not really even a treaty or anything. It's just a note. He just publishes basically through his diplomacy and his skill and his tact and the respect that he had garnered with these other countries. He just basically publishes that the U.S. really expects that everybody's going to leave China alone.
When did he do that? You got a date on that? I
It's-
just want to make sure we get context here.
That's going to be post Spanish American War.
It's post
This
Spanish
is
American
Roosevelt.
War,
This is
but it's
him as Secretary of State for Roosevelt.
right. But I believe the open door note comes before Roosevelt's win in 1904.
Okay.
Right. So yeah,
First
because he
term.
was only Secretary of State through basically the first term, right? Through 1905.
Right about there, yes.
Yeah.
And then he retires and dies shortly thereafter.
Right.
Because he was
Elihu
aged
Root.
by that point.
Well, he was in his 60s. But he was in poor health, and back then, of course,
he smoked. That's for sure.
well, once you start to have heart trouble, you're kind of a goner.
Yeah.
Because there's no heart surgery, there's no heart medicine, there's nitroglycerin pills are about it. So once,
And half of those guys blew up. No, wait, no.
I'm glad you did that because that's a cool thing.
But it's very important, and the European powers didn't go, yes, stuff it.
Well, and I think the timing of this is important. And I think they lived with it for a number of reasons. One, they couldn't get their troops there except by sea. Because Russia was definitely not going to let them go through them.
Yeah.
Because even as, although you can make the argument Russia was a bigger mess than China.
Well, yeah, the Russo-Japanese War is right around this time, too.
Right, 1905.
So you're talking about...
there's competing interests.
Exactly. Competing interests is where I was going to go,
So, by sea there would have had to have been a lot of that done by sea. There's only so much you can do by land. So, but this is also when the American Navy has come into prominence. Now, it's not the British Navy yet, but the American Navy can far more easily go from the west coast of the U.S. to China than any of them.
We can project power across two oceans.
Exactly.
Very unique.
Yes.
Very unique.
Much easier than any of the European powers.
Yes, and really, it is still unique. The Russians come the closest, but they're still looking for a warm water port.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the holy grail for Russia, warm water port that connects to other bodies of water. So we have a little bit of power that we can enforce this to where it's not worth the effort.
And control of the canal.
And we have control of the canal. So we can even move ships from one side of our country to the other, from one ocean to the other. Mm-hmm. Granted, you might be left vulnerable over on the other side, but again, nobody has enough power to project everywhere, ever.
China was a backwater at this point, but Japan was absolutely not.
No, Japan.
They were a westernized power with huge Eastern overtones, but they had all the modern, and the Russo-Japanese War was just an obvious moment of that. Now, this is around that time. I don't know that had been proven yet. That was an amazingly different cog in this X factor, as you were.
Well, I think that probably helped cement this idea that you leave China alone.
That's right, because
that happened after he leaves as Secretary of State, or right as he's leaving, because he leaves July 1st of 1905 as Secretary of State, and that's the year that the Russo-Japanese War, however you want to call it, takes place. So probably between the U.S. saying, we really think you guys ought to leave them alone, it's better to be economic partners than overlords. Which is essentially the point.
Well, yes. That's very important. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Because that's the idea, is to keep where China can be a single entity economically and everybody benefits. And you're not going through 6 different...
That's how he sold it, because it's the greed still gets to take place, but it does so on a level and equal playing field.
A level playing field. That was the idea.
And there's the genius behind this guy. He recognizes, it's better to do business with them than conquer them.
Well, this is partially a legacy of the founding of America. Mm-hmm. Leave us alone. We're our own people. And I think for the most part, even today, that's how we want other countries to be approached. Mm-hmm. You be independent. Let's be friends, but, we don't want to take over you. For all the claims of imperialism in the Middle East, we don't want to stay there.
It's not good business, too.
It's not good business, We didn't go to war in the Middle East twice for oil. Oil companies didn't own any of those oil wells after those wars. None of the U.S. oil companies... Now, they may have made money by consulting, buying that oil. That's a different thing. But as far as direct control, no. And that's not how the U.S. tends to operate philosophically. Yeah, we have our exceptions, don't get me wrong.
Well, that would also be, if you want to talk economics, that's fascism.
Yes.
Government control of the means of production. That's textbook right there.
Well, government control or, government cronies, however you want to...
government ownership, of course, is communism.
Yeah.
But,
so... I think that approach is a very uniquely American approach. And what I find fascinating about the open door policy is the long-ranging effects of it. Yeah. Because think of how the 20th century is different if you have 10 Chinas instead of one.
Yeah. Constant conflict.
Constant conflict maybe, but you're going to have that presence of European powers there.
Yeah.
So maybe the conflict isn't really what you think.
Well, Hong Kong's a good
Maybe
example.
the Middle East doesn't happen the way it does because they're too busy in China screwing it up. So they don't bother screwing up the Middle East in the early 20th century.
Well, World War I had a little bit to do with that in the Ottoman Empire and the breakup of
Well,
that
yeah, but I
and
mean,
all that.
there was a lot of that influence going on in the Middle East prior to World War One.
Right.
That's partly why some of that stuff happened there. But if they're focused over in China, maybe the Middle East turns out differently because the European powers definitely screwed it up.
Well, yeah, you can look forward to Korea and Vietnam and all sorts of things like that. Those don't happen that
Well,
way.
World War II probably definitely plays out differently because Japan, when it invades China, it doesn't invade one huge country.
No.
Instead, it would invade one small country at a time. It's much easier to pacify a small country than a larger country. So maybe Japan in World War II happens differently.
Well, yeah, because all of a sudden the European powers are interested in the Pacific, whereas they would not have been, pretty much. They're too busy in Europe.
Right.
You're talking about, Hitler always wanted a two-front war, and he got one for the wrong reasons. But that's kind of what we're talking about here. You would add an additional front there.
Really, you could call it there was an additional front there, but it was mostly...
It was the
it was
Americans.
sea.
Yeah, it was America versus Japan in the Pacific.
And the Brits were, a footnote because most of their navy was not in the Pacific.
Correct. Yeah.
And what was got destroyed. A good
Yeah,
deal.
they got pushed out of Singapore. Really, that pushes them all the way back, essentially,
to Australia.
to India.
India.
Well, on land, yes.
Yeah, the loss of Singapore then makes Thailand basically undefensible, and it really allows the Japanese to push the Brits all the way to the border of India.
Right. And, as far as at sea, the Japanese push everybody to Australia and back to Pearl.
Yeah.
And, of course, as we know, not taking Pearl was probably their big mistake, but that could have gone either way, too. That's a whole nother
thing.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, you guys are absolutely right. It's a huge continuation of this idea of the Monroe Doctrine of, look, all you old school Europeans got to get out of this hemisphere, and a continuation of this American idea of we're actually going to be troubled by colonialism. We're actually going to be troubled by imperialism.
Which is
it's
so
going to be
ironic.
a debate in our country, and our
Right.
political forces, McKinley and Roosevelt and Hay and all these guys are going to have to walk that tightrope and try to figure out what do we do now. And
because
try
we're different than them.
Well, sort of, but we're different how we go about it because I find it so ironic when you think about it. Because it's almost like when we look in the mirror, we don't realize that we're looking at, or when we look at the Europeans, we don't realize we're also looking in the mirror. Because manifest destiny is imperialism.
Oh, absolutely.
I
I was wondering if we were going to
that.
go there because we talked about this that 1900 the 1800s.
The first half of the 1800s, pre-Civil War, is all about manifest destiny.
That's right, and there's we're willing to be imperialist, but only within this small sphere.
Well, it's a pretty big sphere.
It's a pretty big sphere, relative to the rest of the world. Though we will not export our imperialism, but we'll sure as hell do it at home.
Right.
Because
Well, we defined home. Once we defined manifest destiny, and I forget who came up with the term, but I want to say it was one of the newspapers.
It was preeminent during the War of 1812.
Yeah.
It's been around that long.
Yeah, I mean, it's Polk and all those guys. And
Right.
Tyler.
Well, I mean, between War of 1812 and Civil War is when it really takes off.
Yeah.
And, it's one of those things that we don't always recognize the things in ourselves that we despise in others.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that because there's your eternal question for you is that, that's not a very... I don't want us to think that we Americans were so enlightened as to, compared to the rest of the world. In some ways we were. I mean, Hay was, certainly.
It's a struggle.
He was a reformer.
But we came out, I think we tried harder than anybody else to come out on the other end a little bit better and with a little bit more respect for other people in other parts of the world.
Thanks to guys like Hay, visionaries like him.
Overall, and I've said this before, and I think it's always important to reiterate, especially when we talk about the history episodes involving us. The United States is still a huge experiment in many ways.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And our progress in all areas has always been 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Always.
Yeah.
The progress of freeing the slaves involved the step back of the aftermath of Reconstruction.
And the racism that still pervades.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, but all of that slowly gets better over time.
Yeah.
And
We eventually passed the Civil Rights Act.
eventually we did 100 years almost to the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're almost the only place that even tries.
And maybe
Yes.
that's kind of your point,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it's right. It's
Along with the Brits. I mean, obviously, they were huge in ending the slave trade.
ending the slave trade. So
Yeah, they had
it's-
their moments, too.
Yeah, I think it's the idea that folks, you watch a Western or you watch some other movie about America that's made now, you're going to see a perspective that's America's horrible. Okay, that's art. You're entitled to make that kind of art. But look a little deeper. Yes, there's conflict. Yes, there's not perfection.
There's sins.
There are sins.
Sure.
We are human, and I always say this. We talk about this in Code of Honor episodes. Humans are fallen creatures.
That's right.
If we were perfect, then we'd be angels. We wouldn't be humans. But some people do try hard. And I think Hay, McKinley, and even to a degree Roosevelt tried really hard.
Roosevelt was the first environmentalist.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, he was the first person that saw a need and
Yeah.
actually had the guts, and the will, and the power to make a difference.
You know, he invited prominent blacks to the White House to
Booker T. Washington, and
Yeah.
got a million tons of grief from it.
and told everybody to basically kiss his incredibly wide American ass about it.
That's a very way of putting
But
it.
at the same time, then he became embroiled in the Brownsville, Texas thing and expelled an entire regiment. I think it was of the Buffalo Soldiers out of the Army pretty unjustly. So everybody's got their things. But I think that these great figures in American history at least tried. They tried to live up to what the promise of America could be.
They recognized they weren't perfect and tried to change those parts that weren't.
Right. And tried to use this new emergent American power for good, for a counterbalance to the rapacious ways of the old world.
Right. And that's not to say it was even tried to be used exclusively that way, because obviously it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, you can't everybody do it.
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, the intentions of not... And I hate to put it this way because it makes it sound like I'm trying to make excuses. But it seemed to be more about trying to do the least amount of harm with doing the most amount of good, not just for us, but for others.
Yeah.
Because nobody anywhere acts on the international stage without acting in their own interests in some way.
Well,
And then
altruism can be good business if you do it right. And I
Well,
think
yes.
that's kind of what they're talking about here.
Yeah.
That there's being moral and being self-interested are not mutually exclusive.
They're not. Although
In fact, they're
often they are.
Yeah, well, that's correct.
Yeah.
And hence, because Europe, now maybe we're painting with a broad brush here, but Europe had no qualms whatsoever about exploiting the world for whatever it could exploit.
Yeah,
when I say Europe, I'm speaking essentially Britain, France, and Germany.
Well,
Spain.
but it's not limited to them.
That's correct, not at all.
One of Hay's buddies, or somebody that he had a passing acquaintance with, Leopold of Belgium.
Yes, the
Oh,
Belgians,
yes.
the Belgians were notorious.
Leopold wanted the Congo not just as a Belgian possession, but basically as his own private plantation, and sent people to Africa basically with the idea of shoot everybody that don't look like you. I'm taking this over. I mean, he's one of history's kind of unknown scumbags.
He is, and part of the nuance of this is the fact that he was the uncle of Albert, who married Victoria. Mm-hmm. So he kind of had the Brits in his back pocket, or tried to, because he's related. And then here you get into a lot of that stuff going on. If you want to see him portrayed on screen, the TV series, the British TV series Victoria, with Jenna Coleman, does a fantastic job of laying him out everywhere as kind of the scumbag that he was. He was actually, so it's portrayed here, and this was the rumor, he's actually the illegitimate father of Prince Albert himself.
Oh.
Because he had sex with Albert's mother, who was married.
Yes, I've heard that's how that happens.
To his brother. Stay with me, I will be faithful.
All right.
He was his brother's wife. So,
that's one of the guys that Hay basically is trying to finesse. Is
correct,
this guy
because
that
he has
basically
enormous power.
He wants Africa for his own backyard as a personal possession, and Hay's trying to, in a diplomatic way, smooth that through and say, we don't want to do that. Yeah, we don't want to do that. And he was effective. And again, was very respected throughout Europe and used that respect to make the world a somewhat better place as much as he could.
Yeah.
I wonder what his effect would have been if he had lived another 20 or 30 years. Granted, by that point he was getting old.
That would have been tough. He dies in his 60s. He's kind of wore out with Roosevelt. And
Roosevelt would wear out anybody.
Roosevelt respected him.
Yeah, Roosevelt was much younger, too.
But later Roosevelt came to like, I've got to undo all of this stuff this old man does kind of thing. You know, again, you're right. They're generationally different. They're right. 20 years apart. So Roosevelt wasn't too sad when Hay went off the stage. But after Roosevelt, Taft probably would have brought him back in some capacity. I mean, if he'd have been healthy enough, I mean, Taft could have even tapped him as vice president, maybe.
Right.
Possible.
Right.
Possible.
Yes, it's amazing he didn't hold higher office.
Yeah. Well, he liked being out a little bit, and there is this conflict within the party of the stalwart versus the reformers. Right, yeah. So he's in and out of favor. And he is wealthy, so he does raise a ton of money. But he's not really a speech maker.
Yeah.
So he is more of a behind-the-scenes guy.
The reason I mentioned that, what if he had lived longer, is a man like him, with his view, with his ability to influence, was sorely missing from the world stage prior to World War One.
I was wondering if you were going to go there.
Yeah,
right.
He could have been very influential at World War One.
Yeah.
He would have been willing to break out of the old forms, I think, and would have been charming enough and respected enough that they would have listened and went along.
Now, as we've said before,
it's hard to imagine.
World War I was nearly inevitable.
Yeah. 1914, I can't imagine that summer having gone differently, even if he were there.
But, it might have, but
maybe.
I would imagine the spark still would have happened. I think the assassination and the unrest,
but
that was
maybe
that was Thanos. It was inevitable.
Yeah, maybe he puts it off a year. Maybe they have to wait for another spark.
Maybe, yeah.
Because this was not the only time that stuff has happened that this is the one we remember because it actually led to it.
Yeah.
But there were other sparks that could.
Oh yeah, there would have been another one. There would have been another thing.
Yeah, because you got to remember, Europe, they were constantly at war. From the end of World War II to now is one of the longest periods of peace on the continent ever.
Yeah,
ever.
And you are talking that if he does remain involved and active, he's probably out of government at that time because it would have still been Wilson.
Right.
Yeah, Wilson would have had nothing to do with him, I don't think.
Yeah.
He's too Republican.
He might have been part of a Taft, but then by the time you get there, again, he's in his 70s. Mm-hmm. So he's
probably done by then.
He's ready to head off to New Hampshire and hang out. That's where he had a retirement home was in New Hampshire. So guys, that really went really well. That's exactly where I wanted to take that. And listeners, be willing to rethink the second half of the 19th century and American power. And if you are, I highly recommend John Taliaferro's All the Great Prizes and Robert W. Mary's President McKinley. And again, along with anything you can read about Theodore Roosevelt, it's almost all good.
Yeah.
So, Francis, buddy, what's next?
Code of Honor next time. We're going to dive back into those quotations. The listeners always comment more on those episodes than anything else we do. Something about those quotations that we give resonates with people. It's
kind of our number one downloaded episode.
Absolutely. It's we hear back over that
honestly,
all the time.
It's the one I enjoy the most.
Yeah. Well, you're the hammer. Of course you're going to love that one.
Well, to me, Code of Honor plays in my wheelhouse. It just does.
Yeah, the quotations that we give, and there's no limit on where we'll go on this. We try our very best to be always fresh, always different. Sometimes we'll go thematic. We did the Nietzsche thing.
I think that's the only time we've really gone thematic intentionally.
Well, I've got some more planned that we'll do that in 2021, where we'll do a few like that, because I kind of like that. Yeah.
I may be the contrarian then and not do well.
There you go. I love it.
That's right. Well, you've got the schedule. Come on. You haven't read it yet, have you? No. It's
There's a schedule?
Yeah. Oh, the pain, gentlemen, the pain.
Yeah, I mean,
Dr.
listeners, Robert's doing this on a wing most of the time, and he's
I
awesome at it.
I freely admit it. I prep very little, but to be fair for me, lately I have not had the time.
It's okay.
So
it's all right. It's.
I have prepped for some shows.
Well, some
shows I have not needed to prep.
That's right. Many of them we don't. Many, and if we know we do, sometimes we do. But we presume that the captain at least has enough knowledge to carry us through, and that's why we rotate it, because each one of us gets the opportunity. But listeners, we'd love to hear your ideas of what you'd like to hear us do more of course. And you can catch us on our website, snakesnotters.com. But next time, we got 3 new quotations. Who knows where we're going to go? It's going to be great.
Hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes published every Friday at noon Eastern.
Spread the word. We're on all the major podcast platforms. And leave us a comment or review, because that helps others find us.
We're on Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website, snakesanotters.com.
I'm Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Join us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.